Hi there, it's Miss Jones again with Sew with Miss Jones. In the last video, I introduced you to the simple mask project from start to sew, and we talked about the importance of wearing masks, and we looked at what was in the project bag and also discussed what other equipment we might need to complete this project. In this video, we will be getting our fabric prepped by pressing it first. Then we will mark it to get it ready to sew. The final thing that we will do in prepping is pin our two pieces together. So come along with me. Let's see what we get done today. So before we get started putting your mask together, the next thing that we need to do is press your fabric, if at all possible. So you're gonna need an ironing board and an iron, and this isn't a regular ironing board, and this is something that I have because, hey, I sew a lot and I got lots of gadgets. Anyway, this one's just one that you can put on the tabletop, in case you're wondering why it looks weird. So pressing is different than ironing. Pressing is when you are going up and down with your iron, okay? And because this stuff is 100% cotton, you want to make sure that you have it on the steam setting, and you also want to check your dial. I don't really like to use cotton unless it is something super heavy, so I usually try somewhere around the polyester, the polyester setting. And if you are pressing this at home, please make sure that a grown-up is around. Because we want you to stay safe. They don't have to do it for you, but make sure that somebody is around so that you can be safe. The other thing to remember is make sure you unplug your iron when you are finished. That is another safety thing. Okay, so pressing, remember, is up and down. We're not moving side to side like this. That's ironing. We're going to do pressing. So I'm going to start with the plain fabric because I think it'll be a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing. And I'm just lifting up, moving down, and I have steam. And one of the reasons why I do the lifting up and down without moving it a lot side to side is because if you move it side to side, you can actually stretch your fabric out of shape, and we don't want to do that. Okay, and then I'm going to take my printed fabric and I'm going to do the same thing. And most of the wrinkles on my printed fabric are right in the middle where they where it was folded. Now if you notice, I don't lift it up real high, but I am lifting it up enough that I'm not sliding it back and forth. Okay, I have it pretty well done. There's still a few little wrinkles right here, but those are not going to hurt when I am sewing. I just don't want any of those big wrinkles. After it's stitched, before I turn it right side out, I'm going to press it again. And after I turn it right side out, I'm going to press it again, because the mark of a really well-made sewing project is that you press along the way. That is the difference between something that looks super fantastic and something that looks yucky, okay? So we're gonna press later, but right now, this is enough that we need to do. So, because a lot of you don't have specific sewing equipment at home, I came up with this idea, and I probably didn't think it up myself, but I figured this out and it would work for what we're doing. And that is, if you have a note card that has lines on it, I measured, and the distance between the two printed lines is right about 1/4 of an inch. And that's the seam allowance that we need for this particular project. But it's not 1/4 of an inch from the very edge, because this line right here is really small. Let me move this up a little closer and see if you can see that. Oh, this is hard to see. It's so pale. See, there's a little tiny line right there, and we don't want that one. So I'm going to take a pair of scissors, and I'm going to very carefully trim that line off. And I'm going to leave the line still on there, if at all possible. I don't want to cut that line off. Okay? Now, if one of your parents happens to sew and you have one of these things at home, these things are fantastic for doing this, but not everybody has one. So we're going to use this instead. Then what I'm going to do is take something straight, and I'm going to use this other ruler, and I'm going to use my pencil, and I'm just going to make that line darker because they're not very dark on these cards. Okay, so I'm just going to draw right on top of that other line so it's easy to see. And this is what I'm going to use to mark my seam line. So the directions show us that we need to leave a 3-inch opening on one of the sides, and it's kind of centered there, okay? So I'm going to take just a regular ruler, and somewhere along the side, about halfway across, I am going to make 2 marks right on the edge. Okay, let me move this over just a little bit so you can see it better. And then so I made 1 mark, and it's probably about 1.5 inches or so in from the edge. No, maybe 1 inch. And then what I'm going to do is I made that mark, and then I'm going to lay the 3 right on that mark, and I'm going to make another little mark on the other side. Okay, this part I'm going to put an X here because that's going to remind us, and if you notice I put it real close to the edge because that's the part that's going to be in the seam. This is the part that we will not do any sewing when we put the front and the back together. This is the place where we're going to turn it right side out. So take your card, make sure you have that pencil. Don't use a pen, remember, and you're going to lay the dark line that we made right even with the edge of your fabric. And I'm going to start just by making a few little short lines along here, okay? And I'm trying not to just make one big long line. I could do that. I might do that a little bit later, but I'm just starting by making some short ones, okay? And now I'm actually going in between the first ones that I made. So it looks kind of like I have a dashed line on there, if you can see that, okay? And then I'm gonna move my card down, and I'm gonna line it up again. So I'm right with the edge of the fabric, and I'm going to make those little short lines again. And one of the reasons why I'm making short lines and not trying to just make one continuous long line is because a lot of times when you try to draw on fabric, the pencil goes pop, 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 and then you have a funky line. And so we want to have a nice smooth line. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in between the ones that I already drew and make my line a little more solid. Doesn't have to be completely solid, but they're a little more close together. All right, I am going to continue doing this all the way around. Let me show you this corner here. I want to line it up so that I have it right by this corner. This corner is going to be important because we're going to pivot at this corner. Okay. Oh, I went too far. We don't want to, remember we're going to stop sewing right here, so you don't have to put very many on this edge. And then I'm going to come over here and let's see, can you see what I'm doing? Here we go. I'm going to come right here, and I really need to make sure that I've got it at the end. Okay. And I'm going to make just a few here. Oh, I could probably do a few more. Okay, I don't want any lines in that spot where I put the X because that's to remind us we don't hand sew through here. Now so take your card, and I want you to do it all the way around your plain fabric. using this to do the marks, or if you happen to have a seam gauge like this, set it at the 1/4, that's the second line in from the end, and then you can just make your marks like this. Okay, you slide the little blue thing along the edge of the fabric and make your marks. But I'm telling you, this thing is a whole lot easier. So get a note card if you have one, and this is 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and you're going to draw that all the way around. Okay, come back when it is all marked for sewing. Earlier, when I was talking about what equipment we needed, I forgot something really, really important, and that is straight pins. Now, if you don't have these, but you still have that container that has all of the extra needles in it like this, you actually could probably use the skinnier ones to do this job. Just don't lose them, because you might want to have them later on. But I do have some straight pins, so this is what I'm going to use. Remember, we made the marks on the wrong side of the solid fabric, or the lightest of your two pieces that you have. And we need to put these two pieces of fabric right sides together. So I'm going to move this one out of the way. So right sides, this is the wrong side. That's the side that's not going to show. Right side, this is the one that doesn't have the marks on it, and it will show. So I'm going to move this out of the way because we're going to take a look at the print. So just by glancing at this, you can see, I have it folded, so you can see both sides at once. This is darker. It's the right side. The side that is lighter means that it doesn't have as much dye. It was printed on this side, not on that side. So we want to have right sides together. That means I'm going to have pretty side up. Checking one more time. Pretty side up. And then I'm going to have pretty side or unmarked side down on this one. And what I want to do is make sure that all my corners are matched up really, really well, because everything should be stacked right on top of each other. Alrighty? I am going to start by pinning the 4 corners. I'm not going to pin all the way around in a circle, because what I have found over the years that I have been sewing and teaching sewing is that if you pin in a circle, you tend to push the top one a little bit more, and you'll end up with a bubble at one end. So I'm starting with the 4 corners. Now I want to go over to this opening that we made earlier. Remember, we made a 3-inch opening on one side? And I actually am going to put a double pin here and a double pin here. This is what it says for you to do in your guide sheet. Right now I'm pinning away from me, and I'm telling you that is a lot harder for me to do than if I pin towards me. So you can see that I've got a double pin here and a double pin there, and that's to remind me that I'm not going to sew in between there. I find it a whole lot easier, it's actually more ergonomic, if I take my pin, put it in the fabric close to the edge, and then flip it back towards me. In close to the edge and flip it back towards me. And I probably need the ones on the corners and maybe about 3 in the middle here. I'm just trying to even them out a little bit more. On this end where I'm going to sew, I'm actually just going to put 2 single pins. And then on this other side, the other longer side, I'm going to start by pinning in the middle. And then I'm going to pin halfway between these two and about halfway between these two. So let me see how many pins I have. Not counting the double pins. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. If you do more than 12, you're probably got way too many pins. A little less than 12, maybe 10 or so, you're probably okay. But more than 12, way too many pins. And you know what? The more pins you put in, the more pins you have to take out as you are sewing. Alrighty, I have this piece all ready to start hand sewing. But before I actually start stitching on this project, I am going to practice on some scraps. That's what you will see in the next video. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do the hand sewing. I'll show you how to thread a needle and tie a knot, and then you will use whichever one your teacher suggests that you use, or he or she might have another stitch that they want you to use. But I'm going to show you 2 that I think are pretty easy to do, and they're strong enough that your mask won't fall apart. Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.